What's going on, everybody? Anthony Servino here with the Face Off Sports Network with my top starts and sits at the wide receiver position for week 5. Let's get right into the action with my first start. That is Brian Thomas Jr. from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, there's not a lot of good things to say about the Jacksonville Jaguars this season, as we know. This offense has not looked right. A lot of people want to blame Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator, and I'm one of them. But the past 2 games, they are playing a little bit better. But the one constant in this offense has been rookie standout wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr., who every week this season has given us at least 9.8 PPR points. That's not a bad floor, all things considered. But 3 out of those 4 matchups, he's given us 11.4, 14.7, and last week, a season best 21.9. He has now logged back-to-back games with 9 targets after opening the year with back-to-back games seeing only 4. He's also cashing in with last week being a complete game, 6 of 9 targets, 86 yards, and a touchdown. He also got his first carry of the season that went for a 13-yard gain. I get that Christian Kirk is getting going a little bit, and we are likely going to see Evan Ingram back into the mix. But Brian Thomas Jr. is the wide receiver you want in your fantasy football lineups, especially if you want those pop games. When it comes to snap counts, these 3 wideouts are roughly close. Last week, Gabe Davis led the pack, as he normally has been doing this season, with 46. Christian Kirk, 45. Brian Thomas, 44. But on those 44 offensive snaps, he did run 31 routes. Brian Thomas is logging 21.1% of his team targets. He is averaging 2.41 yards per route run, which is 91st percentile at his position. He's also logging a 22.8% targeted on route rate. So he's in the game, he's being used and targeted, and he's cashing in. And we could potentially see another 20-plus point outing this upcoming game against the Indianapolis Colts, who presents the easiest wide receiver matchup that Brian Thomas will get to date. Now, Brian Thomas Jr., again, gets the Colts. They've been gashed by enemy wide receivers. 3 wide receivers have gone for at least 18 fantasy points against them. George Pickens last week, who got there without scoring a touchdown, logged 7 for $113. We saw Stephon Diggs in week 1 go for 21.9, cashed in 6 receptions for 33 yards and a pair of scores. We saw Rome Odunze pop for 6 for 112 and 1. If there's a game where let's throw a bonus in here, we can even start Christian Kirk this week, because there has been a few times this year, week 1 with Diggs and Collins, week 3 in Chicago with Odunze and DJ Moore, where 2 wide receivers went for at least 15 PPR points. We are starting Brian Thomas this week. Let's go to another must start, Dontayvion Wicks. If you are lucky enough to roster him, or if you were lucky enough to drop everything you had when it comes to Fab or your top waiver wire priority claim to get Dontayvion Wicks, you have a locked and loaded upside wide receiver to insert in your fantasy football lineup. And what a matchup he has. Now, we know what he did last week. His first real action, logging a season best 56 snaps, thanks to the Christian Watson injury. He took 13 targets, 5 for 78, and a pair of touchdowns. It was his 3rd touchdown of the year. Remember, he scored back in week 2. If we remember back to last season, anytime he had the extra opportunity, if Christian Watson or another receiver went down, Wicks cashed in. There was a reason why, because Wicks this offseason on the depth chart going into the season, on the depth chart, is the wide receiver 4. But he was overdrafted. People were drafting Dontayvion Wicks like he was going to see extended playing time. That was probably the same people who saw, listen, Christian Watson might be doing a lot to maintain his health, putting in that extra offseason work. But there's still that chance one of these guys goes down because Dontayvion Wicks, anytime he gets the opportunity, he showcases an outstanding rapport with Jordan Love. And we saw that already last week. It was his second game this year with at least 11.6 PPR points. Obviously, pops for 24.8. 56 offensive snaps, 43 routes run, 3 red zone targets, including 1 inside the 10. With no Christian Watson this week, and possibly for the next few weeks, although they didn't put him on IR, Christian Watson is going to be viewed as a must-start. Look at these matchups. This week, you get the Rams, 23rd easiest matchup. You get Arizona, 21st, Houston, 22nd, Jacksonville, 28th, Detroit, 31st. If Christian Watson remains sidelined through the team's Week 10 bye, these are absolutely smash spots for Dontayvion Wicks. And let's focus on this week. He gets the Rams. As we said, this is a very soft matchup for enemy wide receivers. They've been gashed by guys like Jamison Williams for 24, Marvin Harrison Jr. for 29, Juwan Jennings for 46. Now, they managed to limit and hold Chicago wide receivers. All 3, we saw more. He got into the end zone, but only 11.2 PPR points. And that secondary somehow erases a Dunze and Keenan Allen. But what do we do know? The Chicago Bears ran down the Rams' throats. Their wide receivers didn't really have to do a lot. While Green Bay is capable of doing that with Josh Jacobs, we know this is a throwing team. They're going to use Jacobs to open up the passing game, and this could be a monster outing for not only Wicks, Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, for the whole party. Let's go to our final start before we move to the sits, and that's Brandon Aiyuk, and this is going to be a tough one to swallow. Brandon Aiyuk, I hate saying it, I hate using this narrative, Brandon Aiyuk is due. He's had at least 5 targets in every game. He had 10 targets in week 3 in a matchup, mind you, no Kittle, no Debo, and then Juwan Jennings goes ballistic. What is going on with Brandon Aiyuk? Because outside of that 10-target game in week 3, 5, 5, and 5, that's his target share. He's running routes. He's playing a lot of snaps. The production isn't coming. He has yet to give us north of 9.8 PPR points this season and has given us 2 games under 6.8. This is not why we drafted Brandon Aiyuk. And at this point, it's not about rust. It's about usage. It's about him doing the most with his opportunities. And we're not getting either one. He's not getting the targets, and he's not making the most of the targets that he's getting. Something needs to change here, but the good thing is he has a great matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. If the Arizona Cardinals defense, primarily their secondary, continues to struggle defending the pass, in theory, this should be a really nice get-right game for Brandon Aiyuk. In his career, Brandon Aiyuk has played fairly well against the Arizona Cardinals. He's had a couple of nice pop games, a couple of, he had 148 yards last season against them. He scored 3 career touchdowns against them. He needs to get it going this week because now there's no more excuses. We've seen receivers go off against this football team. Last week, the Washington Commanders, McLaurin and Olamide Zaccheaus go for over 14.5 each. There's certainly enough room here for both Debo and Aiyuk to give you something in fantasy. But again, we drafted Brandon Aiyuk for these monster pop games. We haven't even gotten 10 PPR points yet. I would start him with caution, but I would certainly try to exploit this matchup and start him with a little bit of confidence against the Arizona Cardinals. Remember, if you like content like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the alert icon so you can be notified anytime we are live to answer your questions or drop video content just like this. If you have a start sit question, ask it in the comment section below. One of us from the Face Off Sports Network team will get back to you promptly. Now let's get to some of my sits. Xavier Legette, and Legette with no Adam Thielen. He looks like he's going to have a significant role. He played the most snaps, even more snaps, not by a lot, 60, Deontay Johnson 57, Jonathan Mingo 55. When it comes to targets, he had 10 targets, cashed in 6 for 66 and a touchdown, even ran the ball twice for 10 yards. He ran a season high 36 offensive or 36 routes. This isn't a great matchup. Chicago Bears, they're a shutdown secondary. They played extremely well. You can run on Bears a little bit, which is why I like somebody like Chuba Hubbard. But when it comes to this Legette matchup, it could potentially be disaster. Andy Dalton's been a nice story so far through 2 games. The Bears are going to bring pressure. They're going to make Andy Dalton really, really uncomfortable. And if he's uncomfortable, he's prone to mistakes. There's also Deontay Johnson, who seems to be the safety blanket for Andy Dalton. Not saying Legette's going to be completely erased. He did have 7 targets in week 1. That was with Bryce Young, for what that's worth. Did have 10 opportunities last week. He is being targeted on 22.7% of the routes he is running and only has a 14.7% team target share. I am treading lightly with Legette. I think moving forward, there are going to be times, there are going to be matchups where I think he's a smash. A couple weeks from now, he gets Washington fantasy playoffs. There's a couple of nice spots in there, especially when he's extremely acclimated. Because I get if Thielen's probably going to come back, but Legette should have a stranglehold on this wide receiver 2 to 3 role if he continues to play well. But I'm just not in love with Legette or this matchup. Again, let's review the Chicago Bears before we move off of Legette. They've fairly erased everybody outside of Stephon Diggs, who put up, or Nico Collins, who put up 27.5. The Chicago Bears have only let 2 wide receivers score double-digit PPR points. Last week, Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittington each had 12.2 PPR points each. Every other wide receiver they faced, not named Nico Collins, finished with under 9.9 PPR points. So this could be a potential disaster game for not only the passing attack of the Carolina Panthers, but Xavier Legette. Jakobi Meyers, and there's a very good chance Davante Adams sits again. There's a very good chance Davante Adams might not be on this team by the time foot meets ball for this Los Angeles Raiders visiting the Denver Broncos football game. Jakobi Meyers has been playing well. Back-to-back games with at least 9.9 PPR points, high floor. In fact, he's had at least 9.4 in 3 out of 4 games. He's starting to cook a little bit when it comes to target share. Consecutive games are at least 9 targets, 5 receptions, 49 yards. He had a really nice outing, complete game against Carolina 2 weeks ago, 7 for 62 and a touchdown. Now 5 for 49 last week, not bad. But without that touchdown, his ceiling is capped, like it is for a lot of players. Now you get the Denver Broncos. And yeah, sure, we could view Jakobi Meyers as a number 1 wide receiver on this football team without Davante Adams. But that means there's a good chance maybe he's getting Patrick Surtain. And that is not good news if he gets somebody like Patrick Surtain, who is possibly the best shutdown corner in the NFL today. If not, Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, they're all playing outstanding football right now for the Denver Broncos. It is really hard to throw the football on them. And to be fair, 20.6% team targets going to Jakobi Meyers, a 70.4% catch rate, which is 80th percentile amongst wide receivers. Not a lot of yards per route runner, ADOT. So we have to view Jakobi Meyers as a high floor player who needs a touchdown to return ultimate fantasy ceiling or value, whatever you want to call it. I just don't see it happening this week. Denver, they're erasing everybody. Like we just talked about how the Bears are minimizing enemy wide receivers. The Denver Broncos, week one, Tyler Lockett at 13.7, DK Metcalf, JSN, they were non-existent that game. Chris Godwin through the slot had a nice outing in week 3. Where was Mike Evans? He was shadowed by Surtain. Last week, the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, Alan Lazard, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, all held under 10.8 PPR points. This is a very good secondary. They've only allowed one wide receiver to score a touchdown this year, and that was Chris Godwin. They have not allowed a wide receiver to exceed 77 yards receiving on them, and that was Lockett in week 1. I get it. If you're in a bind, there's bye weeks, there's injuries, you need to start Jakobi Meyers. I get you might have to. I would try to look elsewhere if you could. Let's go to my final sit. That's Jaylen Waddle. We know why we're sitting Jaylen Waddle. This is not about talent. This is about the quarterback situation and the pulse of the offense overall without Tua. And let's face it, they do not have a pulse. It's going to be Tyler Huntley again. Even if it was Skylar Thompson, I don't care. They could put a 60-year-old Dan Marino in there, and this offense might be a little bit better than these guys they have now. Jaylen Waddle without Tua, 3 straight games. After opening the year 5 for 109, 4 straight games, or we're going on 3 straight games with 4 receptions and under 41 yards. He has yet to score a touchdown this season. He has had fewer than 6 targets in all 4 games this year. He only has 3 red zone targets on the year. There's just not a lot of meat on the bone. Now, granted, the past 3 games without Tua, Buffalo, Seattle, Tennessee, they're all top 10 teams when it comes to difficult matchups for enemy wide receivers. In fact, Tennessee and Buffalo are 1 and 2. It gets easier. They go to New England. New England is one of the easiest matchups for fantasy wide receivers. They're giving up the 27th most PPR points. If there is a game where you could potentially throw Waddle in and maybe he gets a big one for a touchdown, it's now. It's this matchup upcoming against New England. This is a secondary that can be exploited. I just don't know if Tyler Huntley is good enough to exploit anybody at this point, because he certainly couldn't get anything going against Tennessee. And again, Tennessee's a really good defense, but the Patriots are still an NFL defense. And this could be one of those situations where, hey, Tyler Huntley starts taking off a little bit more and tries to run. Maybe there's a lot more dump-offs going to Devin Achane and those running backs. I am treading lightly with Jaylen Waddle despite a really nice matchup. I just don't trust the quarterback situation. That's going to do it for today. I'm Anthony Servino for the Face Off Sports Network. We'll see you next time.